Is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, the 27th of August, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Dawn Neeson.
In for Bev Turner, indeed. Now, restoring trust, the Prime Minister will make his first keynote speech this morning, pledging to reverse a decade of decline, despite the growing cronyism row within the party.
Oasis reunion tour. Are you feeling supersonic this morning? Noel and Liam Gallagher announced 14 shows in the UK and Ireland next summer. Sophie Reaper has more.
Well, say the Oasis fans have finally found a brighter day as the Gallagher brothers announce a reunion and a nationwide tour.
And carnival chaos, 330 arrests, 8 stabbings, 3 in critical condition, including a 30-year-old mum fighting for her life. The Met Police say they're tired of seeing crime at the Notting Hill Carnival.
And talking of law and disorder, police officers have almost entirely stopped punishing shoplifters as some violent offenders are being let off with a slap on the wrist if they say sorry.
Oh, make it stop, please. Meanwhile, tributes from around the world continue for former England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson, who died aged 76.
Are you joining the clamour for tickets? The cheapest ticket's going to be about £140.
Yeah, about that. I do not understand, Andrew Pearce, how you can go on holiday, have a lovely, relaxing time, beautiful time in the sunshine, and come back and be so grumpy. Yes, of course. It's fun, it's exciting, it's nice news.
Just doesn't do... Yeah, I'm very pleased for Oasis fans, but I've never really got the Oasis.
No, well, why don't we have a team outing? You can come with me, and we'll go, and we'll have a few beers, and you're looking vaguely terrified now. I think it'd be good fun.
Right. OK. What do you think? We'd love to hear your views on all our topics this morning. Send your views and post your comments by visiting
at gbnews.com/your say. But first, let's get the news with the lovely Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has pledged to bring trust back to politics ahead of his speech to the nation later this morning. Sir Keir Starmer will warn things will get worse before they get better, and next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He is set to address the riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. It all comes as the Prime Minister faces pressure over accusations of cronyism as Conservatives demand an investigation into recent civil service appointments. Shadow Science and Tech Secretary Andrew Griffith says it's hypocritical for Labour to talk about trust.
In particular, he promised to introduce new levels of transparency and integrity, and yet what we've seen week by week over the last few weeks over the summer is revelations about Labour appointments to the civil service, the independent civil service. These aren't just the normal special advisors that all governments make political appointments to. These are some of the top roles in the independent civil service that Labour's been giving to donors and its political supporters. So it's pretty rich to talk about trust in politics at the same time as that.
In other news, 5 more people were stabbed and 230 were arrested on the closing day of Notting Hill Carnival. That comes after 3 people were stabbed on Sunday, including a 32-year-old mother who's in a serious condition in hospital. Police have also said that 15 officers were assaulted and 90 arrests were made on the first day of the event. Residents of an East London block of flats engulfed by what they called a nightmare fire say they've lost everything. Everyone's been accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following the fire in Dagenham. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people being taken to hospital. And after lots of speculation, Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. This upside. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour in 2025. The Britpop band, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced a series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with him. Andrew Pearce is back from his holiday and me, Dawn Needham, in for Bev Turner.
Well, the Prime Minister will vow to clean up Downing Street and put it, what he says, back into service later this morning.
This comes as Sir Keir Starmer is under pressure to reveal who gave Downing Street passes to Labour donor Wahid Ali, as he is accused of cronyism. So, Andrew, you're the political expert on this one. Keir Starmer today, right, it's not the most positive. Things can only get worse. I don't remember that in the manifesto.
No. You remember Blair's manifesto?
Yes, things can only get better, complete with music. Exactly. Things can only get worse. How is he going to get us all on board with this things can only get worse message?
They keep saying everything. They've inherited the worst Tory mess ever. And of course there was a mess, and 14 years of Tory rule, they got kicked out. But hang on, inflation is lower now than it was when Labour were booted out of office in 2010. Unemployment is considerably lower, and we've had pretty good growth in the last 6 months. Now, set against that, the NHS is in a terrible mess. Things don't seem to be working, and we've got huge international debt. But we did have a pandemic. And the Ukraine.
There is that, and you know, you and I between us have been in newspapers for a very, very long time. Every headline I've ever written about the NHS has involved the word crisis, and that's for decades. That is going back for decades.
Because it's not fit for purpose. It doesn't. It isn't the NHS. It was set up in 1948. The world was different. We lived half as long.
Yes, we did. We're all living way too long. The one thing I want to ask, you know, we had Labour absolutely slating austerity under the Conservatives. I'm getting the impression this is the Labour version of austerity, what's going to be spoken about today.
The other thing is, of course, they've made a big thing about sleeves and the Rose Garden and how the Downing Street parties, and yet they haven't killed this story about Wahid Ali. Who's Wahid Ali?
Cronyism.
A very, very successful media tycoon. I pointed out in the Mail just before the election started that he'd given £20,000 to Keir Starmer for suits and glasses. 3,000. Your glass.
I just put mine on. Yeah.
Do you need £20,000 for
No.
a full 5-week election campaign?
No, I don't. And but a free pass for Downing Street
But he'd also given £500,000 to the Labour Party.
Yes.
And he's given a free pass to Number 10. Number 10 initially say he's got a pass, and they say the pass is gone and it's a temporary pass. It looks bad. And, of course, where was the party that Wahid Ali hosted? Oh, in the Rose Garden, where the Prime Minister was making a speech today, talking about cleaning up politics.
The Rose Garden, where he goes, all the Tory bad stuff happened in the Rose Garden. Yeah, right. So, how's he going to get out of this one? Let's go to GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster to explain what we're expecting Sir Keir Starmer today to say, live from the Rose Garden, which is haunting me now. Catherine, hi. What's going to happen?
Yes, good morning. So Sir Keir Starmer will be talking at about 10 o'clock from the Rose Garden. Yes, to journalists. We'll have our political editor, Chris Hope, there. Hopefully he'll get a question afterwards. But he's also talking to about 50 members of the public, people that he met on the election campaign trail, apprenticeships, nurses, small business owners. And his basic message is going to be, yes, things are going to be getting worse before they get better. Times are really, really tough. But we promise you change, and we're going to bring change. And part of that is trust. Now, as you've said, I think that's problematic, given these cronyism allegations, given the past that Lord Ali had. Now, Labour said, yes, it was only temporary, doesn't have it anymore. I still think it's tricky. Also, these civil service appointments of people very closely linked to Labour, I think that's difficult. But what they're going to try to do is basically say, look, we're bringing change. You can trust us to work in your interests, and to remind us all over and over again of the legacy of 14 years of Conservative rule. It's no accident at all that it's happening in the Rose Garden, because, of course, that is the scene of the crime, if you like, as they'll try to paint it. Dominic Cummings, who drove all the way to Durham with COVID at the height of the first lockdown, he had that famous press conference in which he didn't really apologise. And then, of course, the gatherings in the Downing Street garden also during lockdown. So this is a way of Labour saying, look, all this awful stuff happened under the Conservatives, but now we're bringing the public into Downing Street. We will act in your interest. But I think, it's going to be very difficult, because they got this big majority, not because people are wildly enthusiastic about the Prime Minister or about Labour, but largely because people are so very, very cross with the Conservatives. A lot of people thought, well, they can't be any worse. They've promised change. That's going to be difficult. And I do think that these cronyism allegations are not a great start, not at all.
I wonder, Catherine, how much people still are vexed by Partygate. That was then, this is now. We've had a general election as well. He's even going to be banging on about how the Downing Street swing was broken at one of the parties. Look, appalling behaviour, and the Tories paid a price for it. But is it still politically relevant, do you think?
Well, I think to some people it absolutely is. If you had a relative in a care home, if you lost somebody and, you had to sit apart at a funeral, there were people who made huge, huge sacrifices during COVID, and those people, I think, will never be able to forgive that. There'll be other people that have moved on completely. But, the Conservatives did have the misfortune to be in charge during COVID and during the cost of living crisis. Now, certainly mistakes were made, but Labour are going to capitalise on this. Of course they are. Just as the Conservatives came along in 2010 and, they were helped, weren't they, by that infamous note saying there's no money left. Labour had the misfortune to be in charge at the financial crisis, and they took a lot of blame for that for many, many years, although, it wasn't their fault. There was a global financial crisis, and Labour are going to do now, as the Tories in 2010, that there's no money left. There's not a lot of money around. There's going to be tax rises in this budget. We've already got uproar about, cutting the winter fuel payment. And there's going to be very, very difficult choices that are going to be unpopular. And of course, Labour are saying they need a decade, they need 10 years, a decade of national renewal. But of course, we've seen in Europe politics largely moving to the right. They've got a big majority, but it's very, very shallow. Reform, they've only got 5 MPs, but a lot of people very sympathetic to what they think. You know, they've got a big majority now, but Boris Johnson had a big majority in 2019. And look what happened to that.
Indeed. Catherine Forster, thank you very much. It'll be very interesting to see how this goes today, won't it?
Yeah.
But we move on for now.
I think you should be moving forward and sounding more positive and not keep...
You know what? How long does it take before they stop saying, yeah, but that was all a bit rubbish?
Yeah.
You know, I just want some positivity.
Yeah.
I really want someone to say, right, like they did in the manifesto.
Yeah.
You know, we're for the working people. We understand what you're going through. Change.
Amy, £20,000 suits and glasses. I'm for the working man. Thank you, Ada.
Well, yeah, there is that. OK. But up next, tributes continue to pour in for former England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson, who has died at the age of 76. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We'll see you soon.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Northern Opera Group performs rare and wonderful operas in imaginative ways, enabling audiences and artists to discover new works and composers from across opera's history. The group produces the annual Leeds Opera Festival, which combines new productions of rare operas with a wide range of talks, panel discussions, workshops and other events. 2024 marks the festival's 8th season, and it's set to offer the world a premiere of Northern Opera Group's latest commission, Sherlock Holmes and the Sign of Four, an interpretation of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle 19th century mystery novel. It's the first ever opera adaptation of the enigmatic detective. The artistic director of the Northern Opera Group, David Ward, joins me now to tell us more. David, welcome to GB News. If this is the first time that Sherlock Holmes has been translated into opera, I'm imagining that may mean that it's quite difficult to do. Is that so?
It's certainly a creative challenge, yes, and we knew that when we started on the project. I mean, as you'll know, opera traditionally has been slower-paced stories, ones that relied on less kind of narrative drive and action. So our first challenge was actually how do we translate this kind of story into opera? So it's been about looking at that musical language we use, the theatrical language, and I very much hope that we have been able to find a solution to do that. Well, it first started in 2020 when we all had a lot of time on our hands, and I finally picked up the Sherlock Holmes novels to have a read. And as I was reading them, it just struck me that these could make a fantastic opera, as well as those great theatrical set pieces. You know, you've also got a wonderful kind of cast of characters that you could have on stage. I also got really interested in this idea of how do you use music to show Sherlock's internal world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
9:47, Britain's News on GB News. Oasis, they're back. You are so excited.
You actually managed to inject some enthusiasm into your voice then, yes. To be fair.
14 shows.
Yes.
In the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely.
No TV, so you've got to go and watch it.
Potentially headlining Oasis as well.
if they're still speaking by then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, so who's got... Is it Sophie Rupert that's got all the details for us? Let's go to Sophie now, who's in Manchester, we believe. Sophie.
She's there.
She's coming.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely, maybe.
There she is.
There you
Sophie,
go.
are you excited? Are you as excited as Dawn about the reunion of Oasis?
Absolutely, Andrew, and I think everyone in Manchester is sharing that sentiment here this morning. Now, the sentiment has been rife, hasn't it? The speculation has been rife, I should say. The excitement, the tension, the build-up, it's all been happening over the past few days, but finally this morning, 8 o'clock on the dot, we got that announcement that finally, 15 years after the band broke up for good, just minutes after they were due on stage, that little by little, the brothers have managed to reconcile and that they are reuniting for that nationwide tour. Now, this morning we're here outside the Boardwalk Club in Manchester, which in 1991 is where Oasis performed their first ever gig. Now, it's hard to imagine, isn't it, them in such a small building where they would have had dozens of audience members, as opposed to when you think about the crowds they drew to places like Nebworth, and I'm sure that they'll draw to these nationwide gigs we're expecting next summer. But of course, just a few years after they performed here in 91, they released Definitely Maybe in 94. They released What's the Story, Morning Glory in 95. And now, 30 years later, they are going to be returning for this nationwide tour. So people here in Manchester, as I'm sure you can imagine, are incredibly excited, because I think Oasis really just epitomises the Manchester music scene. Of course, they were born during the Manchester music movement here. They went on to become, of course, one of the biggest bands ever, certainly in Manchester, if not in the UK. Now, of course, people here in Manchester this morning, very excited. But the big question on everyone's lips is, are people going to be able to get tickets? So we spoke to some people earlier. This is what they had to tell me.
I'm buzzing, I'm a massive Oasis fan. I've seen Liam Gallagher a few times, but together, man, it'll be sick, yeah.
Yeah, very excited. It's going to be interesting to see how long it lasts for, though.
It'd be great if you get tickets.
Big fans?
I'd say my brother definitely more so, but I'd try and get tickets to go.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm going to try for tickets on Saturday.
Are you a bit nervous? Because I think a lot of people are going to try.
Yeah, I'm nervous, but I've got a big group, so I'm hoping that I'll get them.
A lot of excitement there, but also a lot of nerves as people wait to see if they're going to get tickets on Saturday. I know I, for one, will have my fingers crossed that I can get some.
So, Sophie, just to be clear, there are 10 gigs, is it, that's been confirmed?
14, isn't it?
14.
Just say that again for me, Dawn.
So there are 14 gigs that have been confirmed.
14 thus far, yeah. We'll see 4 in Wembley, 4 in Manchester Heaton Park, and then 2 others in Cardiff, Dublin and Edinburgh. But of course there is speculation about potential other gigs that we may see the brothers perform at. I think a lot of people will be hoping for more, just to give them a better chance on tickets.
Right, and those tickets go on sale this Saturday morning?
That is correct.
All right, Sophie, thanks for that. That's Sophie from Manchester.
Keep hitting the phones then, Andrew. You're going to look at me like that all show, aren't you? It's like, oh, sad.
Who's it we've got with us in the studio? Super fan, Paul Coy.
Well,
normally...
I can see you're a Blur man. I can see throughout the whole thing that you're all...
No, I don't do Blur either. But you've got a part in Oasis history, Paul.
It's a huge part, Andrew, is that back in '95... Noel Gallagher came into my radio show. I used to do a show with Roland River, on the comedian Roland River, and we used to do an entertainment show on Virgin Radio, and then he came in and played live. So this was at the time when there was speculation even then about the brothers breaking up, and then they weren't going to play. They were about to play in Earl's Court at one of the famous gigs. So anyway, the film I get a message from the film company saying, look, we'd like to use your interview with Noel for the film. So I'm thinking, well, that's great. It's probably going to be a good 10-minute spot in the middle. The film will be hung around it. Had a contract sent, and I was told that I would be paid £1, which, by the way, never arrived. Has never arrived. So anyway, so I signed it, everything was there, and then the film came out, and I am in there. My extensive, deep, probing interview with Noel Gallagher, with Roland, is there.
Let's have a listen.
OK, listen carefully.
No? Hello? Rumours of a split or what?
A banana split, yeah.
Yeah? Where's the rest of the band tonight, then?
Who cares?
What do you
that's
think?
very
Right.
That's it. That was the longer version
Okay.
of the interview.
Right. Yes.
So yeah. So that was worth a quid, do you think?
Starring. What were they like? What was he like?
It was all right. You know what? It hasn't changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
It's still.
Which one was that?
That was Noel.
Right.
That was Noel. So he played "Don't Look Back in Anger." It was the first time though he had played that acoustically on our radio show, which was
wow.
great.
That is my favourite song.
Ah, well, there you go. So
because it's the only one I know.
Oh, now that's not true. You do know others. It's just one of those. I know it if I hear it.
Exactly.
I know it if I hear it.
You must know Wonderwall.
Yeah, when someone plays it, but the one I always can remember the name of, and it's the one they always. It's like an anthem, isn't it?
It is, of course it is. But I'll tell you one thing though, and this is how bands work, and all the years that I've worked with music, is that yes, they've announced 14. I'm telling you right now, what they do, every major band does this. They would have booked Wembley, I would assume, for probably 3 or 4. So what's going to happen is that you'll get the dates will go, sold out, and then you will see on Monday morning, due to the fact that it's sold out, we are going to put on another date. And then there'll be another one, and then there'll be another one. This is not going to be the end of it.
Do you think they're doing it for the money?
Yes.
So do I. And it's absurd for them to say they're not. Why else would they do it?
It's
It's
probably a bit of both.
One of them had a very expensive divorce last year.
You don't play, you don't stand on Wembley Stadium and have thousands and thousands of fans screaming, enjoying your songs. That's not about the money. I mean, that's amazing, and that's what any band would want to do. But the money is going to be involved in it as well. It's the whole thing. And you know what? And even if they don't get on, you've got look through history. We've got the Kinks, Ray and Dave Davis. They hated each other. They carried on. The Everly Brothers, even before then.
Thank you, Paul. The big announcement is Keir Starmer. That's coming. But first, here's Craig with the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split across the UK today. Many northern areas seeing some rain, but largely dry and fine further south. So we can see this rainfall first thing this morning across many parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But for Northern Ireland, it will quickly clear here, so conditions improve as the day goes on. That rain just moving into Cumbria and Wales later on too. And that rain just quite heavy and persistent at times, so some fairly poor travelling conditions, especially across parts of southwestern Scotland. Ahead of it, dry and bright and increasingly warm, could see highs reaching around 25 or 26 degrees in the southeast. So moving into the evening, conditions improve for many parts of Scotland. Some late spells of sunshine around, maybe the odd shower. But for southwestern Scotland and Cumbria, that rain just persisting right throughout the evening. So again, a bit of a difficult commute home here. A few showers also for Northern Ireland, and that rain just beginning to fringe into southwestern England too as we end the day. But for the rest of England, it's a fine end with some late spells of sunshine. Into the evening, that weather front will just move a little bit further eastwards. It starts to weaken as it does so, but still some patchy rain on it as we move through the nighttime period. Either side of it, some clear skies, and for all of us, it's a fairly mild night. Towns and cities staying firmly above double figures. Into Wednesday morning, that area of cloud and patchy rain just really lingers across many central parts of the country. Behind it, another spell of rain moving in for Northern Ireland and Scotland. So after a little bit of a drier spell, turns wet, unfortunately, again here. But down towards the southeastern parts of England, remaining onto the dry and fine conditions, and increasingly warm. Could see highs reaching around 28 to 29 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Aberdeenshire, the A947 is closed in both directions at Old Meldrum after an accident causing delays between Old Meldrum and Newmarket. In Fife, the A92 is closed southbound at Belfarg, where trees fallen on the road, causing delays heading towards Glen Rothes. Trains have been stopped between Sheffield and both Doncaster and Wakefield Westgate because of the points failure in the West Midlands. Handsworth New Road at Winson Green is closed for an investigation. In London, Victoria Embankment's closed after an accident by Temple Station, with long delays on approaches to there. Also in London, the A20 is closed eastbound from Crittles Corner at Sidcup to the M25 at Swanley, where weekend roadworks have overrun. And on the M26 in Kent, it's taking around 20 minutes in westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win an incredible £30,000 in cash. And you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
Get your entry in now for another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash. Text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome, Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News. I'm Andrew Pearce, this is Dawn Neeson, who's in for Bev Turner. We are waiting, of course, for the main attraction today. It's being billed as Keir Starmer's first keynote speech as Prime Minister. It's in the Downing Street Rose Garden, familiar to many people. By the way, the gardens in Downing Street are beautiful.
They are very lovely. There's a live pictures you can see on your screen there with the press waiting for Sir Keir to turn up. And I think pretty much a lot of the speech has been leaked, hasn't it? We know roughly what he's going to say.
I don't know why they do that. They trail so much in advance. So when the speech is eventually made, people are rather bored.
Yes, exactly.
We've heard all that.
Yeah, and it's not going to be positive. But, I mean, as a lot of you are saying on here, Andy M, good morning, Andy, says, today's Starmer is a big boo-hoo excuses speech. It's not my fault, boo-hoo. It's the Tory party. It's 14 years. It's Truss. It's Farage. It's the economy. It's Israel. It's the far right. It's racist. It's all your fault. Nothing to do with me. An awful lot of you are getting in and saying messages like that.
Well, look, of course they can blame the Tories for a lot of things that went wrong because they were in power for 14 years.
Yes.
But we want the Prime to start looking forward. You talked about it in the beginning.
Yes.
When Blair got in, the
things can only get better.
The Dream song, things can only get better. That was a bit more positive.
It really was, and I just think now people want that. I think we feel like we've been having a big kicking already, especially with the unrest and the riots we've seen this summer. We want politicians now to listen to us, to understand how we're feeling, and to be able to move on rather than looking back in anger, the Oasis reference again, rather than doing that all the time.
And he's going to
I want some positivity.
He's going to talk about the riots as well, and talk about how the solution came from within the community. But is he going to talk about the problems around the riots? I mean, is he just going to go on and on about the far right, or is he going to address the elephant in the room that Labour never want to talk about? That there are big issues in some of our inner city towns, some of our towns in cities like Birmingham and Manchester, about the scale and speed of immigration.
Well, this
and how it's changed communities beyond recognition and people feel strangers in their own home.
Because this is the issue I constantly have. There are two things that Keir Starmer keeps saying. He keeps saying, we are talking to the community and it's change, it's time for change. But what is this community? Why is it only some communities he appears to be talking to?
Yeah, well, we had this conversation with a senior police officer because one of the police officers in Birmingham had said, we've been talking to community leaders. So I said to this police officer, who are the community leaders then? Who talks to the leaders of the white community or the Jewish community? Or because, you know, the church is broken down now.
Yeah.
So, and who are the who are the leaders of the ethnic minorities? Stephen Pound was on, the former MP, and he said often the leaders of the community are self-appointed, self-styled, and speak for no one.
Yeah, exactly. They don't speak for themselves. I mean, no one is, I don't think, talking to, we keep going back to the white working class football fan, normally men. Nobody's talking to them, and that's why people are getting angry.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine Forster, morning, Catherine. This is being billed as a big moment in the premiership of Keir Starmer. The government's barely 8 weeks old. A big speech. He's going to stick the boot in on the Tories again. Is he going to give us any... We've seen... Oh, here he comes. He's walking on. Catherine, I'll let you introduce him.
Yes, so Parliament is back next week. This is a big speech, a big moment. I don't think we're going to hear anything particularly new, but let's hear.
Sunshine, no rain, no wind, probably tempting fate, but it's really good to see you all here, see familiar faces in this garden. So thank you so much for coming along this morning. When I stood on the steps of Downing Street, just over there 2 months ago, I promised that this government would serve people like you, apprentices, teachers, nurses, small business owners, firefighters, those serving our community and our country every day. I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government. And that's why in our first few weeks we've set up the National Wealth Fund, because we want every person and every community to benefit. It's why we've unlocked planning decisions, because we're going to build 1.5 million new homes. It's why we set up Great British Energy, to create good jobs and cut people's bills. And it's why we ended the national strikes that have crippled our country for years. Because I defy anyone to tell me that you can grow the economy when people can't get to work because the transport system is broken, or can't return to work because they're stuck on an NHS waiting list. We've done more in 7 weeks than the last government did in 7 years. And these are just the first steps towards the change that people voted for, the change to deliver. But before the election, I also gave a warning. I said change would not happen overnight. When there's a deep rot at the heart of a structure, you can't just cover it up. You can't just tinker or rely on quick fixes. You have to overhaul the entire thing. Tackle it at root, even if it's harder work and takes more time. Because otherwise, what happens? The rot returns in all the same places, and it spreads worse than before. You know that, I know that, and that's why this project has always been about fixing the foundations of our country. But I have to be honest with you, things are worse than we ever imagined. In the first few weeks, we discovered a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. And before anyone says, oh, this is just performative or playing politics, let's remember The OBR did not know about it. They wrote a letter setting that out. And they didn't know because the last government hid it. And even last Wednesday, just last Wednesday, we found out that thanks to the last government's recklessness, we borrowed almost £5 billion more than the OBR expected in the last 3 months alone. That's not performative, that's fact. But as well as the things that we've discovered, we've also seen shocking scenes across the nation. A mindless minority of thugs who thought that they could get away with causing chaos, smashing up communities and terrifying minorities, vandalising and destroying people's property, even trying to set fire to a building with human beings inside it. And as if that wasn't despicable enough, people displaying swastika tattoos, shouting racist slurs on our streets, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, the very place we honour those who gave their lives for this country, desecrating their memory under the pretence, and it is a pretence, of legitimate protest. Now they're learning that crime has consequences, that I won't tolerate a breakdown in law and order under any circumstances, and I will not listen to those who exploit grieving families and disrespect local communities. But these riots didn't happen in a vacuum. They exposed the state of our country, revealed a deeply unhealthy society, the cracks in our foundations laid bare, weakened by a decade of division and decline, infected by a spiral of populism which fed off cycles of failure of the last government. Every time they faced a difficult problem, they failed to be honest. They offered the snake oil of populism, which led to more failure, round and round and round, stuck in the rut of the politics of performance. I saw the beginning of that downward spiral firsthand back in 2011, when riots ripped through London and across the country. I was then Director of Public Prosecutions. And when I think back to that time, I see just how far we have fallen. Because responding to those riots was hard. Of course it was. But dealing with the riots this summer was much harder. Back in 2011, I didn't doubt that the courts could do what they needed to do. This time, to be honest with you, I genuinely didn't know. Let me tell you this, every day of that disorder, literally every day, we had to check the precise number of prison places and where those places were to make sure that we could arrest, charge and prosecute people quickly. Not having enough prison places is about as fundamental a failure as you can get. And those people throwing rocks, torching cars, making threats, they didn't just know the system was broken. They were betting on it, gaming it. They thought, they'll never arrest me. And if they do, I won't be prosecuted. And if I am, I won't get much of a sentence. They saw the cracks in our society after 14 years of failure, and they exploited them. That's what we've inherited. Not just an economic black hole, a societal black hole. And that's why we have to take action and do things differently. And part of that is being honest with people about the choices that we face, how tough this will be. And frankly, things will get worse before they get better. I didn't want to release prisoners early. I was chief prosecutor for 5 years. It goes against the grain of everything I've ever done. But to be blunt, if we hadn't taken that difficult decision immediately, we wouldn't have been able to respond to the riots as we did. And if we don't take tough action across the board, we won't be able to fix the foundations of the country as we need. I didn't want to means test the winter fuel payment, but it was a choice that we had to make, a choice to protect the most vulnerable pensioners while doing what is necessary to repair the public finances. Because pensioners also rely on a functioning NHS, good public transport, strong national infrastructure. They want their children to be able to buy homes. They want their grandchildren to get a good education. So we have made that difficult decision to mend the public finances so everyone benefits in the long term, including pensioners. Now, that is a difficult trade-off, and there will be more to come. I won't shy away from making unpopular decisions now if it's the right thing for the country in the long term. That's what a government of service means. This shouldn't be a country where people fear walking down their street, their TVs showing cars and buildings being set on fire. This shouldn't be a country where the Prime Minister can't guarantee prison places. This shouldn't be a country where people are paying thousands more on their mortgages or waiting months for hospital appointments they desperately need, where our waters are filled with sewage, where parents worry that their kids won't get the opportunities that they did, where nothing seems to work anymore. So when I talk about the inheritance the last government left us, the £22 billion black hole in our finances, that isn't about a line on a graph. That's about people's lives, your lives. And the Tories are still not being honest. They know their recklessness cost them the election, but they won't accept the cost that they've inflicted on the country. And they won't apologise for what they've cost you. They're just still thinking about themselves. Now, this government won't always be perfect, but I promise you this, you will be at the heart of it, in the forefront of our minds, at the centre of everything that we do. And that's why I wanted to invite you here today, to show that decent, hard-working people who make up the backbone of this country belong here. This is a government for you. A garden and a building that were once used for lockdown parties. Remember the pictures just over there of the wine and the food? Well, this garden and this building are now back in your service. It's not just that the last government relied on easy gimmicks and bad ideas. Those things happened precisely because the government itself lost its focus on the hopes and ambitions of working people. During those recent riots, I made huge asks of the police and of the criminal justice system. People already stretched to the limit. They knew I was making big asks of them, and I'm not going to apologise for it. But let me tell you this, they delivered. They deserve our gratitude. And that's why I went to Southport, to Lambeth, to Belfast, to thank them personally, to shake the hands of the first responders who rose up to the ask I was making of them. They deserve a government that trusts them, supports them, and works with them. That is the sort of government that we will be. One that works with people, not does things to them. One that believes in hard graft, not gimmicks. Honest about the challenges we face, and working tirelessly to fix them. And that is how we will always work. Now, next week, Parliament returns. The business of politics will resume. But it won't be business as usual, because we can't go on like this anymore. Things will have to be done differently. We will do the hard work to root out 14 years of rot, reverse a decade of decline, and fix the foundations. Between now and Christmas, we will carry on as we've started, action, not words. We will introduce legislation and take decisions to protect taxpayers' money, to take on the blockers by accelerating planning to build homes and boost growth. We will forward this autumn to harness the full potential of AI for growth and for the public good. We'll bring rail service into public ownership, putting passengers first. The biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation to give people security, dignity and respect at work. And Great British Energy will be owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer, producing clean energy and creating good jobs. That is our focus for the rest of the year. But I will be honest with you, there is a budget coming in October, and it's going to be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation that we're in. Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden, and that's why we're cracking down on non-doms. Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up, and that's why we're strengthening the powers of the water regulator and backing tough fines on the water companies that have let sewage flood our rivers, lakes and seas. But just as when I responded to the riots, I'll have to turn to the country and make big asks of you as well, to accept short-term pain for long-term good, the difficult trade-off for the genuine solution. And I know that after all that you have been through, that is a really big ask and really difficult to hear. That is not the position we should be in. It's not the position I want to be in. But we have to end the politics of the easy answer that solves nothing. But I also know that we can get through this together. Because the riots didn't just betray the sickness, they also revealed the cure, found not in the cynical conflict of populism, but in the coming together of a country. The people who got together the morning after, all around the country, with their brooms, their shovels, their trowels, and cleared up their community. They reminded us who we really are. I felt real pride in those people who cleaned up our streets, rebuilt the walls, repaired the damage. And I couldn't help thinking about the obvious parallels. Because imagine the pride we will feel as a nation when, after the hard work of clearing up the mess is done, we have a country that we have built together, built to last, that belongs to every single one of us, and all of us have a stake in it. Our hard work rewarded a dozen times over, because we'll have an economy that works for everyone. An NHS not just back on its feet, but fit for the future. Streets that everyone feels safe in. No longer dependent on foreign dictators, because we're producing our own clean energy right here. And giving every child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, the chance to go as far as their talents will take them. I won't lose sight of that prize. I won't lose sight of what we were elected to do. And most importantly, I won't lose sight of the people that we were elected to do it for. You. This is our country. Let's fix it together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now I've got a number of questions from the media, and I'll start, if I may, with Vicky Young from BBC News. Vicky.
Vicky Young, BBC News. Prime Minister, you say that you want to be open with people, but some will think that you weren't honest during the election campaign about changes to, for example, winter fuel allowance. And many now want to know what the impact of the budget will be. So if you're being honest, can you tell them now what kind of tax rises you're considering?
Well, two or three things Vicky to say about that in the first place. We were being honest about the situation before the election. We set out very clearly what we would be doing with tax rises. I made it clear on numerous occasions that national insurance, VAT and tax would not go up, the triple lock for working people, income tax. And that remains the position. I also set out that our plans were fully funded and fully costed. What I did not expect was a £22 billion black hole. And I know the Tories say that's performative. If it's performative, why didn't the OBR know about it? Look at that figure of £5 billion last week in 3 months. If that's performative, why didn't the OBR know about it? These are basic questions about what we have inherited. As I've just said, I didn't want to have to deal with the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. But we have to fix the NHS. We have to fix our homes, our schools. And pensioners rely on them in the same way as everybody else does. So I'm not going to preempt the budget, but I'm absolutely not going to accept that the inheritance that we have isn't anything other than dire, a £22 billion black hole. And I'll just add to that what I said about the prisons, because I obviously feel very strongly about this. To have to gauge every day of those disorders, when people are trying to burn down hotels, I'm having to look at lists of prison places and where we've got them because of the mess that we were left. That's disgraceful. No Prime Minister should ever be in that position when trying to deal with disorder. That's what we inherited. That's what we will fix. Thank you, Vicky. Anushka, please.
Thank you. Anushka Rastana, ITV News. Prime Minister, you talk about choices, and there are plenty of things you've chosen to spend money on. You've chosen to give bumper pay rises to doctors, higher than for nurses and teachers, and you've chosen to take these benefits off pensioners. Age UK say 2 million will be pushed into hardship as a result. So what do you say to those pensioners who are not well off, who feel that you are choosing to balance the books on their backs?
Well, so far as the winter fuel allowance is concerned, firstly, I would say it's not a particularly well-designed scheme, frankly, and I think everybody would concede that. I do think it's important that we make sure that the support is there for those pensioners who need it most, which is why we're pushing for the pension credit to be taken up and looking at other allowances. But equally, simply allowing national strikes to go on and on and on and not resolving them was costing the country a fortune. You can't build the economy, you can't grow the economy if you haven't got a basic transport system that's working. You can't grow the economy if people can't get back to work because they can't get the operations that they need. And we've got to get the economy going. And so that is why we've made the decisions that we have made. And on the pay review bodies, more broadly, doesn't cover all of the disputes that we've had to deal with. What we know is the last government didn't set a framework for that when they started down the road of the pay review. And they put at least one of them in the cupboard of the buildings over the road and ran away from it. We can't carry on like that. We've got to make difficult choices. Thank you, Anushka. I've got Emily from Channel 4.
Emily with the Channel 4 News. Prime Minister, on prisons, what guarantee can you give to the public that no prisoner who is let out early will go on to harm anyone? Or is the truth that you can't guarantee that and that the early release scheme carries with it an undeniable risk?
Well, look, the first thing is, obviously we've put in place a framework to ensure that we don't release those who create the greatest risk. That's a basic safeguard that we've had to put in. And I'm not pretending for 1 minute this is a decision I want to make. I spent 5 years prosecuting people and putting them in prison. The idea of releasing people who should be in prison because the prisons are too full and we don't have the places goes against everything I've worked for years. But we've got to face facts. They haven't built the prisons, the last government. They've pretended that you could have longer and longer sentences, send more people to prison, at the same time that you could veto or choose not to have a prison built near you. They were false choices, and here we are, without the prison places that we need. So, what are the options available to an incoming government? Let the prisons get so overcrowded that we can't arrest people and put them before our courts? Would that have worked in the disorder? I don't think so. I was really clear in my mind that one of the main ways in which we're going to have to deal with the disorder was making sure those who were throwing rocks, setting fire to buildings on a Saturday or Sunday were facing the full face of the law within days. I had to create the conditions for that, because the alternative, you would be putting a question to me saying, how come all these people in disorder didn't even get arrested, have not been put before the courts and can't be sentenced? Because we haven't got any places. This is not a decision that I wanted to take. It's not a decision that any Prime Minister would want to take. And I can't tell you how shocked I was when I discovered the full extent of what they've done with our prisons. And it's going to take time to fix it. I can't build a prison by Saturday. We will fix it. We've already taken the measures that are necessary to make sure we can get through the disorder. But I shouldn't be sitting in the Cobra room with a list of prison places across the country on a day-by-day basis, trying to work out how we deal with disorder. But that's the position I was put in, and it's frankly not good enough. Thank you, Emily. Beth.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, you say you want to build trust and be honest with people. You've got off to a bad start with pensioners who voted for you, and then you cut their winter fuel allowance, and it wasn't in your manifesto. You also said in the general election you had no plans to raise taxes beyond what you'd set out in your manifesto. Now you're saying something else. So can you please level with people? Are you going to raise taxes? And are you looking, when you talk about the broader shoulders, are you looking at taxes on working people? Or are you now looking at a range of wealth taxes on shareholders, homeowners, big business? Thank you.
But as I said in the campaign, in relation to working people, income tax, VAT, national insurance, we will not increase tax. I was clear before the election, I'll be clear again after the election. Obviously, the budget is in a number of weeks, and the detail will be set out there. But I say again what I said before the election, which is we have to get away from this idea that the only levers that can be pulled are more taxes or more spending. Our number one mission is to grow the economy, to make sure that we are creating the money in the first place. That remains the number one mission. Nothing knocks that mission. And that's why it's really important that we have a transport system that works. That's why it's really important that we have an NHS capable of getting through the backlog. That's why it's important that we have the National Wealth Fund, Great British Energy, that we unlock planning so that we can get on. All of those decisions are decisions we've taken in the first 7 weeks to make sure we get the economy where we need it. But we're going to have to take tough decisions. I did not cater for a £22 billion black hole. And that's because it wasn't on the ABR's books. We were looking at the available, as you were, the available material. But it wasn't there. The OBR didn't know about it. That's why they're conducting a review, is to find out why they didn't know about it. But £22 billion black hole on top of what we knew to be the situation is a problem that I'm not just going to pretend isn't there or that we can easily fix. We're going to have to fix it. We're going to have to fix it quickly, because I genuinely do not think that the politics where we simply pretend things can be done that can't be done is working. And we will do it straight away. That's why I call about sort of getting the rot out now, because if we don't do it, if we paper over it, we know what's going to happen. It's like the damp or whatever. Anybody who's ever decorated a house knows how this works. Pretend it isn't there, paper over it, and guess what? In a year's time, it's 10 times worse. We're not going to do it that way. Thank you, Beth. I'm going to take Andy Bell, if only so that... Where is Andy? Andy, if only, so I could say personally into your face, well, fantastic on your daughter's achievement in the Olympics. Georgia was absolutely brilliant. We were all glued to our sets, and please convey our congratulations to us. I know many people already have. Andy.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't quite expecting that, but thank you very much for that message. Prime Minister, you talk about getting the rot out. Your administration's already been criticised for making a lot of appointments, political appointments, inside the civil service, inside what should be strictly non-political appointments. Wouldn't it be a good idea to have a review now by your Commissioner for Ministerial Standards, just to set the record straight, to clear the air? Because at the moment, a lot of people are wondering whether you really are getting the rot out in terms of the way public administration works.
Well, look, Andy, most of these allegations and accusations are coming from the very people that dragged our country down in the first place. So you'll forgive me if I take that approach to it. We are going to fix the foundations. We've got to do it at speed, and I'm determined to have the right people in the right places to allow us to get on with that job. I'm enormously aware of how big a task this is and how we have to move at pace. And that's why we're getting the best people into the best jobs. But I'm not really going to take lectures on this from the people who dragged our country so far down in the last few years. Thank you. I've got Kieran from The Guardian.
Thank you, Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Just on that theme, can you tell us why you've cancelled the appointment of your new National Security Advisor? And can you pledge that there will be an open and transparent process to replace that person?
Yes. Of course, there'll be an open and transparent process. And no, I'm not going to publicly discuss individual appointments. Thank you. Jack from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Jack Alsford from The Sun. You've made clear today your reasoning for giving big pay rises to public sector workers, but now you've shown you're willing to get your chequebook out. Do you not risk spending the rest of your premiership playing a game of whack-a-mole with ever-growing union demands? And just quickly, you spent a lot of time today looking back in anger, but are you happy that Oasis has decided to reform on your watch?
What can I say in relation to that? It's very, very good. It's a great song. I'm not sure I'm the best place to champion it after the last 20 or 30 minutes. But look, let's see what happens with Oasis. In relation to the pay settlement, look, we were very clear before the election we weren't going to meet the demands of the unions. They were making demands which we did not think could be met. And we haven't met them. We'll take the same tough approach as we go forward in relation to any pay issues. We have to take that approach. And therefore, I will be as tough on this as I was before the election, because we have to be tough about it. But I'm not going to pretend that having hospitals that can't operate properly is good for the economy, or having a transport system where people can't get to work is good for the economy. Just sitting it out year after year was costing a huge amount of money. So government has to get the balance right. But let me be clear, I'm going to be really tough about this with the unions, as I'm being tough with everybody else, because this is part of the work we have to do to get out the rot and start to rebuild our country. Thank you. I've got Chris from The Times.
Thank you, Chris Smythe from The Times. Just to follow up Andy's question about the widespread concern of people with Labour links being appointed to the civil service, was your answer effectively that process doesn't really matter when the task is so urgent? And if you are talking about honesty and service, can you not just explain why you appointed some of these people, why Lord Ali, for example, had a down street pass, what he was doing here? And again, on Beth's theme, you said clearly wealth taxes were in the frame. Are you also saying to people that further spending cuts are also being looked at?
Well, let me be clear. I wasn't saying process doesn't matter. I think you and others have heard enough from me over the years to know that process does matter to me. Procedures do matter to me. And I'm absolutely determined to restore honesty and integrity to government, because I think that is core to ensuring that people appreciate that politics can be a force for good. I think one of the reasons people have been disillusioned, disaffected, if you like, in recent years is because they can't see politics as a force for good. So that process and procedure and doing things properly matters to me beyond the fact that it, as it were, should be done properly. I think it's core to politics. So I didn't mean that. And look, if you take Lord Ali, he's a long-term donor and contributor to the Labour Party. He was doing some transition work with us. He had a pass for a short-term time to do that work. The work finished, and he hasn't got a pass. You know, that's the state of affairs. And the second bit of your question, I'm so sorry. Well, look, I mean, try as you might, I'm not going to preempt the Chancellor in relation to the budget. I am indicating there are going to have to be tough choices. Obviously, we made commitments in relation to tax on working people in the election, which we intend to honour. And I frankly don't want to have to take the tough decisions that we're going to have to take, but I'm not going to shy away. I genuinely think one of the problems in politics has been people standing at podium like this, pretending that hard choices don't need to be made, or pretending or knocking things down the road. We've seen, I don't know how much, just knocked down the road, the other side of the election, get it somewhere else, don't take the decision. It's what happened with prisons. Decisions should have been taken a long time ago. But each month it was just knocked another month, another month, another month, hoping somebody else would pick up the mess. We can't go on like that, so we're going to have to grip it, and I want to grip it early. And that's why I said in my speech, if we have to make unpopular decisions now, in the short term, to make sure the long term we can actually do the change that we want to do. The 5 missions in terms of rebuilding this country are really important to me. But I know I'm not going to be able to do them if I don't clear out the rot first and take those tough decisions. Thank you. I've got Daniel from The Telegraph.
Hello, Daniel Martin from The Telegraph. How can you justify strike agreements with the unions when there's no it doesn't include any agreement to increase productivity? And secondly, on Ukraine, do you believe that Ukraine has the right to use Storm Shadow in Russia?
Let me deal with both aspects of that. Look, we came to settlements on the pay disputes, which I think people would say were fair. The rate, what was asked was not what was given. There was clear negotiation in those discussions. And as I say, we can't pretend that strikes, which will be going on a long time, are doing anything other than holding our country back and costing us a future. There's no neutral cost to this. In relation to Ukraine, as I've said many times, the position of this government is no different to the position of the last government. No new decisions or different decisions have been taken. We have put additional resource in terms of what we're providing, both money commitments and weapons commitments. I'm not pretending the last government wouldn't have done that, by the way, because I genuinely think one of the good things about recent years in relation to Ukraine, and there's not much good that can be said of it, is that there's been a unity in Parliament on that. And as I've said to President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine, we will stand with them for as long as it takes. I'm not going to get into tactical questions about the use of weapons for reasons that I know you'll understand. David from the Mirror.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Dave Boak from the Daily Mirror. Prime Minister, on the subject of hard choices, will safe and legal routes be extended on your watch, and do you think this can play a role in stopping the boats?
Well, so far as stopping the boats is concerned, we have got to take down the gangs that are running the vile trade in the first place, which is why we're setting up the Border Security Command. It's why when we had the European Political Community meeting just 2 weeks after I was elected, and we had 46 European leaders to Blenheim, I discussed with them in some detail how we would work better together to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade in the first place. I'm absolutely clear in my own mind that that's how it will be most effectively done. Just as in the recent riots, I drew on my experience of 2011 in terms of what worked to deal with the riots. So with the gangs that are running this vile trade, drawing on my experience of having taken down terrorism gangs, those that smuggle guns and drugs, I think that the same can be done with those that are running this vile trade. Thank you. And then Lucy from the FT.
Thank you, Lucy Fisher. Prime Minister, you've spoken today about restoring honesty and integrity to government, and in your manifesto you pledged to establish a new independent ethics and integrity commission with its own independent chair. You've been in Downing Street for more than 50 days now. Can you commit to telling us when you're going to launch this commission? And can you confirm today that the chair will have the power to launch their own probes autonomously and that they will be able to publish independent verdicts from those probes? Thank you.
Well, Lucy, look, that is a commitment that we made. We will stick to it. I don't have a precise date. I do think it's important that it can initiate its own inquiries, if you like, because that has been an inhibitor in the past. So that commitment stands. As soon as we've got a date, I'll give you a date. But I am very keen that it has the ability to start investigations under its own steam, because I think that's one of the bits that's been missing. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
So, just in case you wondered, that's the Prime Minister wrapping up that speech and press conference. The clapping, by the way, was not from the assembled press. We don't do that. That happens at American press conferences. I remember doing that with the American president being amazed when the press clapped when the president walked in, and clapped him when he finished. That was members of the public who'd been invited into the Downing Street Rose Garden, some of whom he'd come across.
Community leaders.
Yeah.
He invited a cross-section of community leaders.
Listen to that speech. I've just put a tweet out about this. It strikes me that he hasn't made the transition from opposition leader to Prime Minister. He is still in campaign mode. That speech could have been just as easily made on the campaign trail. Terrible Tories, 14 years, they've got to go, they've messed everything up, we'll sort it out. Where was the positivity? What was the positive agenda? There wasn't one. And almost in parenthesis, he mentioned the scrapping of the fuel tax for pensioners, which is going to affect 10 million. Almost as if it's an afterthought. It's become a massive millstone around.
Well, there was no risk assessment carried out on that for a start. We know that. Rachel Reeves just thought, right, OK, let's suddenly do this. So we had no idea how it was actually really going to affect people on the ground. And, you know, it's like it was just dismissed. It's like, well, I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it because of what the Tories had done.
A little bit of forward thinking. You talked about we're going to have our own clean energy. It's called GBNews, but he didn't say, actually, a vast public cost.
Well, yeah.
It would cost, what, nearly $9 billion to set
Absolutely. 8.3 billion of taxpayer funds.
And you think that they said that will mean fuel bills will be cut £300 a year, every year. That's what Ed Miliband, who's the climate change minister, told us during the election campaign. And yet, fuel bills for people over the age of pensioners are going to go up by around £500 this year. If you lose the winter fuel allowance, plus the fuel...
The energy cap, That is what's really annoying you out there. And, you know, and Ed Miliband is also going to give that £11.6 billion in overseas aid for climate crisis. That's the black hole. The black hole, by the way, that they were warned about. Everyone was warned about that black hole. They knew that. But the one thing that you're really getting annoyed about is the fact that, you know, I'm going to be tough on law and order. I won't tolerate this. And mentioning constantly the recent riots. Without mentioning, in Southport, without mentioning anything to do with the fact that we've had 5 stabbings at the recent Notting Hill Carnival. Three of those people are still critical. Now, if you're going to be tough on crime, then you need to be tough on all crime, not just target and I'm sorry, that's why the white working class community. What's he doing for them?
Exactly. And well, there are 7,000 police officers tied up in the Notting Hill Carnival this weekend. There was a big debate on GBNews yesterday as to whether it should be scrapped. It won't be scrapped. The Mayor of London is very committed to it, and so is this Labour government. But it is, you're right. I mean, he talked on and on and on about the far right orchestrating riots. He didn't mention at all, did he, that there is an underlying issue in some of those towns and cities about the scale of immigration.
And it doesn't make you far right to be concerned about immigration. No. Rioting, criminal damage, wrong, OK? But you need to start listening to ordinary people, the sort of people that are leaving messages for us
It was a really boring speech.
It was slightly boring, wasn't it? It did feel like it went on.
But we gave it to you live because it is his first keynote speech in number 10 as Prime Minister. Now, moving on up next.
Yes, a transgender woman from Australia has won a discrimination case against a woman-only social media app after she was denied access on the basis of being male. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family. The Jollens.
The Newmarket midweek seconds play Thurlow and Old Mill Greenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickhambrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years for Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved, because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George. And we're all available, so we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the furlough is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:48. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, an Australian court ruled on Friday that removing a transgender woman from a female-only social networking platform, Giggle for Girls, constituted discrimination.
Yeah, this is serious, by the way. It's all true. Someone who identified as a woman, Roxanne Tickle, claimed she was legally entitled to use services meant for women. Well, the Chief Executive of Giggle for Girls, Sal Grovers, joins us now from the Ivory Coast. Sal, morning to you. You've had quite a battle on your hands here, the Gold Coast, of course. Your point was this website, your app was for women, biological women, to talk to each other, not for somebody who is a trans woman.
Basically, yes. I mean, the app was for females. It's as simple as that. So it excluded all males. It was just... regardless of gender identity didn't come into it. Incidentally, females with a gender identity are more than welcome. So if you're a female who says that you are trans or non-binary or whatever these other made-up concepts are, they were welcome. So, yeah, it was just no males. But the Australian Federal Court at this very moment in time has decided that any man who claims to be a woman is legally female and that sex is changeable, and therefore we have no choice and are forced to admit males into female spaces. So women's rights are essentially non-existent in Australia at this moment in time.
So, Sal, putting it... well done, by the way, for taking this course away. Putting it briefly, basically, Australia then have just made being a biological female illegal?
Beyond illegal, non-existent, essentially, in the eyes of the law. Yeah. Basically, it's been said that the ordinary meaning of sex is that it is changeable, but the reality is that the ordinary meaning of sex is that it is biological and immutable. We're born the sex we are, and we die the sex we are. It never, ever changes. In fact, sex is a protected characteristic in part because of the fact that it is immutable and the biological reality that comes from that. So it's a very unusual time, that's for sure. But we have some disastrous legislation that caused this to happen. In the UK, you're very lucky in the sense that the women fighting for the similar fight, well, the same fight that I'm fighting for, were in a slightly different position in that they were fighting to stop these disastrous laws coming in. In Australia, they came in stealth into 2013, and so we have to undo them now.
Sal, you've been fighting this for a good couple of years now. You've got a little girl, I know, and she's 2 years old, but so her entire life you've been fighting this particular case. Were you expecting the verdict you got?
I anticipated it in the sense that the Australian Human Rights Commission had intervened in the case as amicus curiae, which means friend of the court, and they were there to interpret the law. And I was very aware that the Australian Human Rights Commission is very captured by gender ideology for two reasons. This case started as an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint, and because I refused to give in to sort of their demands, it escalated to federal court. They said I had to go to sex and gender re-education, let all men who claim to be women on the app. That's not going to happen. But also just their stance has always been, and their interpretation of the law has been very clear, that they say that any man who claims to be a woman is a woman. In fact, they even say that a man's desire to be pregnant is enough to make him considered a woman under the law. So it's absolutely insane. So I anticipated it because I thought that the court might just go with the AHRC's interpretation.
What do you do now? I mean, if you were to say to this person, this trans woman, I'm sorry, I know what the law says, but we're not letting you join, what would happen to your group? Would you be closed down?
Well, so at the moment, the app has actually been offline for the past 2 years, in part due to this case. But it was in the ruling that if it was online, I would be forced to allow him on. So essentially what has happened in Australia, that women have been told that we literally do not have the right to say no, excuse me, to say no to a man. That's the devastating part of it, basically. Women like myself have been screaming for a really long time about this issue and saying, you know, that men are claiming to be women, they're being taken seriously, they're taking away our rights. And we've been called hysterical and told that it's not happening for a long time. But that's undeniable now. We now know that everything we've been saying is true. So in that sense, we've been vindicated. And now we have to just go about fixing it, essentially. You know, sex is not changeable, but laws are. So from this, we appeal to the High Court, which is an error in law court, and go from there and fight all the way to get women's rights back.
Sal, this must have taken an incredible personal cost on you and your family. I mean, it can't have been easy to have this stress hanging over you.
Oh, I say to her, I'm losing my hair. That's probably the sort of the physical stress of it that's been showing. It has been incredibly stressful, but I think even for the women who aren't like in this position that I'm in, it's just as stressful. It's stressful to have your rights taken away like this, and to be told that you have to see a man as a woman. I mean, and just to watch it all happen. And in some ways, I think maybe it would be more stressful if you weren't in a situation.
The clock has beaten us, but Sal, that's Sal.
Thank you very much, Sal. Good luck.
Chief Executive of Giggle for Girls. What a brave woman she is.
Very good. Here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split across the UK today. Many northern areas seeing some rain, but largely dry and fine further south. So we can see this rainfall first thing this morning across many parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But for Northern Ireland, it will quickly clear here, so conditions improve as the day goes on. That rain just moving into Cumbria and Wales later on too. And that rain just quite heavy and persistent at times, so some fairly poor travelling conditions, especially across parts of southwestern Scotland. Ahead of it, dry and bright and increasingly warm, could see highs reaching around 25 or 26 degrees in the southeast. So moving into the evening, conditions improve for many parts of Scotland. Some late spells of sunshine around, maybe the odd shower. But for southwestern Scotland and Cumbria, that rain just persisting right throughout the evening. So again, a bit of a difficult commute home here. A few showers also for Northern Ireland, and that rain just beginning to fringe into southwestern England too as we end the day. But for the rest of England, it's a fine end with some late spells of sunshine. Into the evening, that weather front will just move a little bit further eastwards. It starts to weaken as it does so, but still some patchy rain on it as we move through the nighttime period. Either side of it, some clear skies, and for all of us, it's a fairly mild night. Towns and cities staying firmly above double figures. Into Wednesday morning, that area of cloud and patchy rain just really lingers across many central parts of the country. Behind it, another spell of rain moving in for Northern Ireland and Scotland. After a little bit of a dry spell, turns wet, unfortunately, again here. But down towards the southeastern parts of England, remaining onto the dry and fine conditions and increasingly warm. Could see highs reaching around 28 to 29 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win an incredible £30,000 in cash. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. Time is ticking. Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Tuesday, the 27th of August. Live across the United Kingdom, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Dawn Neeson in for Bev Turner.
Well, things are going to get worse before they get better. That is the message from the Prime Minister as he teased a painful upcoming October budget.
That's what we've inherited. Not just an economic black hole, a societal black hole. And that's why we have to take action and do things differently.
The PM is unapologetic about pay rises for public sector workers and defends cutting benefits for pensioners. And it's a big budget coming up in October with lots of pay.
And Oasis reunion tour. Are you feeling supersonic this morning? Noel and Liam Gallagher announced 14 shows in the UK and Ireland next summer.
No, I'm not feeling supersonic, sorry. Carnival chaos, 330 arrests, 8 stabbings, 3 in critical condition, including a 32-year-old mother who is fighting for her life. The Met Police say they're, quote, tired of seeing crime. Notting Hill Carnival.
Yes.
Must be used to it by now.
Well, quite. And on the same theme, law and disorder. Police officers have almost entirely stopped punishing shoplifters, as some violent offenders are being let off with a slap on the wrist if they say sorry.
Paralympic legend and wheelchair user Lady Tanni Gray-Thompson forced to crawl off a train as no one was available to help her. She joins us shortly.
That's appalling, that story. I was reading what she was saying about it this morning.
This is the most decorated Paralympian in
Yes.
history. 11 gold medals, I think. LNER railway train, and that's a lot that are going on strike.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you think this day and age.
She had to crawl off the train and put her own possessions down there, and a lovely cleaner said come up and tried to help her, but they're not insured to help.
Unbelievable.
But how much of the pay rise they've had?
15% and about to go on strike.
Well, yes, indeed. But this is not about our opinions. This is all about your opinions. So send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, let's get those news headlines with Sophie Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but that the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street earlier, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better, and next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. Speaking a short while ago, the Prime Minister reiterated that economic growth is the top priority of the government.
I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
It all comes as the Prime Minister faces pressure over accusations of cronyism as Conservatives demand an investigation into recent civil service appointments. Speaking earlier on GB News, Shadow Science and Tech Secretary Andrew Griffith says it's hypocritical for Labour to talk about trust in politics.
In particular, he promised to introduce new levels of transparency and integrity, and yet what we've seen week by week over the last few weeks over the summer is revelations about Labour appointments to the civil service, the independent civil service. These aren't just the normal special advisors that all governments make political appointments to. These are some of the top roles in the independent civil service that Labour's been giving to donors and its political supporters. So it's pretty rich to talk about trust in politics at the same time as that.
In other news, 5 more people were stabbed and 230 were arrested on the closing day of Notting Hill Carnival. That comes after 3 people were stabbed on Sunday, including a 32-year-old mother who's in a serious condition in hospital. Police have also said that 15 officers were assaulted and 90 arrests were made on the first day of the event. Residents of an East London block of flats engulfed by what they call a nightmare fire say they've lost everything. Everyone's been accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following the fire in Dagenham. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people being taken to hospital. Now, from today, the NHS 111 helpline will now offer mental health support to adults and children who are in crisis. Local health systems previously had their own separate phone lines, which took about 200,000 calls per month. It makes the NHS in England one of the first countries to offer such a support service for mental health issues, as well as for physical problems. Russia has launched another wave of about 200 drone and missile attacks at Ukraine overnight. At least 5 people have been killed and dozens injured due to the strikes, which appear to be the biggest attack on the country in weeks. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said it was vile and claimed the attack had targeted civilian infrastructure. It comes after the Kremlin had said there would be a response to Ukraine's incursion in Russia's Kursk region. David Beckham has paid tribute to Sven-Göran Eriksson and said he will be forever grateful to the former England manager who died yesterday, aged 76. In January, he had revealed he'd been diagnosed with cancer and given at best a year to live. Tributes have poured in, including from Nancy Delolio, who was in a relationship with Eriksson from 1998 to 2007. And after lots of speculation, Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour in 2025. The Britpop band, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced a series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Local people in Manchester are excited about the news. Apologies, we will get that to you in the next bulletin. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News. I'm Andrew Pierce. This is Dawn Neeson, who's in for Bev Turner. Lots of people getting in touch.
Lots of you. No, I have to say,
to our Prime Minister's first speech.
Very, very angry reaction on here. I'm going to start with you, our Elaine, that was the one I was looking for. Really good message. Same old Stalin Starmer cannot answer a question without looking at answers written by the Snivel Service. Lots and lots of people agreeing with you.
He does look down the whole time, doesn't he?
He does. He does really look at his notes all the time. Keith Whitehouse, not my PM. Mary says, I hope Starmer hasn't gone to lunch thinking he's done a good job with his speech. And Trudy says, I mean, he's just prepping us for higher taxes, isn't he? He didn't mention any trouble at the Notting Hill Carnival or the boat people. It's not, you know, and having a go at the people that he should be talking to. But Titch echoes your point, Andrew. I thought the election was over. He has just laid the groundwork for doing the biggest dump on the nation. He's doubled down on everything and we're screwed anyway. All he's done is tighten the screw and made the dump smellier. Yeah, not a lot of love in the room. It's Starmer brushed away the number 10 pass. The Lord Wahid Ali issue with him having a free pass, a very unusual free pass to number 10. Starmer brushed away that question, didn't he?
He certainly did. And I think it's a very significant question.
Yeah.
Why did Wahid Ali get a pass to give unfettered access to Downing Street? Because he'd given £500,000 to the Labour Party, including £20,000 in clothes and glasses for the Prime Minister as he is now? Or not?
And
I think we know the answer.
Well, quite exactly. And lots of people saying, well, how comes the black hole was a surprise to Keir Starmer? Because literally everybody else knew about it.
Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies predicted it would be 20 billion, and Labour said it was 22.5 billion.
So, I mean, they were warned, everyone knew, they were warned that, you know, the tax plans you have will not fill the black hole.
Well, let's see
clue there.
What our political editor, Christopher Hope, thinks about it, who's in Downing Street. Chris, will they be thinking behind that famous door, job well done? Because I thought it was boring, lacklustre, far too much campaign mode and nothing really significant or new in it.
Hi Andrew, hi Dawn. Yes, you might say that. I mean, this press conference was meant to be held on the Saturday after the election, but it poured with rain, so we were inside in one of the staterooms. We heard there from Sir Keir Starmer. He made very clear that he was challenged, wasn't he? And he's on the defensive, I think, about the cuts to pensioner benefits. The winter fuel allowance has been cut from millions of pensioners. They're trying to encourage people to take up on the pension credit to ensure they can qualify for support that way. That might work. But the big news, I think, from this was looking ahead read into this October 30th budget, Andrew and Dawn. He said there that those with the broader shoulders should carry the burden. He says it's going to be painful. So I think that's a warning. They're going to try and get all the bad news out as best they can in the first few months of this campaign. I should say I had my hand in the air for GB News throughout that press conference. He's had 4 press conferences now since he became Prime Minister. He hasn't called GB News at a single one, and I've been at 3 of them.
Where might they come from? I remember interviewing a couple of years ago, and I asked him about wealth taxes.
Are mentioning that here as well, that he is not, he mentioned the riots an awful lot, we know that, but he's not addressing the problems that cause those riots, saying we're going to, I'm tough on law and disorder, I'm going to throw everyone in jail, etc., etc., but he's not addressing the problems, and he's doubling down on not addressing the problems by talking to GB News and talking to our listeners.
There could be homeowner taxes, we simply don't know, but he is...
Well, Dawn, that's right. I think our listeners and viewers, they are big concerned about the way he approached those dreadful riots. No one defends them, but not to recognise there are concerns about immigration in communities across the country, and it's not a far-right issue. That was my question for the PM. He didn't want to take my question, so what can I do? I do my best for the viewers and listeners and for you in the studio, but if they won't take my question, what can I say? But I think, yes, it was definitely, I think they're saying they've made tough choices. The big issue for this government is growth, getting the economy growing, and that's why they've defended these pay deals with unions, all of them above inflation, some of them many times above inflation. You might ask why train drivers went on strike or announced strike the day after a 14% pay deal. So Keir Starmer says no point in, if you can't get to work, you can't grow the economy. So in his world, there's a price being paid here, get the economy working and then move on. But of course, the worry is the ratchet going forward. You have other unions saying they'll be pushing for similar pay rises. I think next month's TUC conference, the trade union conference, will be a big one with more demands for pay parity and pay restoration after 14 years of keeping pay quite low.
Brilliant, Chris, thank you very much. Lots of you are getting in touch on this one. Please do keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. We will try and read as many out as we can, because a lot of you are incredibly angry about what you heard Sir Keir Starmer say today. Now, we move on. Soldiers at an RAF base have said that their accommodation is in an unlivable condition. GB News can reveal that troops posted to RAF Benton in Oxfordshire are living in squalor amid leaking pipes and rat infestations. Our national reporter Charlie Peters has this exclusive and joins us now in the studio. Charlie, this sounds terrible.
Terrible is a fair word to use. I mean, soldiers I spoke to said that the conditions were slum-like, unlivable. They referred to leaks, pipes bursting in their accommodation, mould and rat infestation on the base. Now, RAF Benson in Oxfordshire is a frontline station. It houses both operational and support squadrons. Puma helicopters are flown out of there. The next generation of pilots and those working in the Air Force are based there. They also have soldiers based there because the military is tri-service and the RAF requires support from the Army. Personnel based there, some of them have told me that their accommodation is substandard. We have several images that they've sent through of those conditions. Now, soldiers sharing this information have to do so on the condition of anonymity because they're not permitted to speak to the press. But with the advent of social media and the possibility to share this information online, so many of these crises and these accommodation scandals have come to light. It's nothing new. Soldiers have been living in pretty much a state of disarray for many decades, but only now is it so obvious. A commission early this year found that the backlog of repairs required would cost some £4 billion to deal with. It comes at a time when many families are being housed in separate accommodation while repairs go on. Many are forced to live in leaking and moulding properties while they wait for those repairs. There was a case earlier this year of a girl being rushed to hospital living in a military accommodation site because of the mould in her house. It is disgusting. It is very poor. And it comes at a time also when the armed forces are slipping slowly below the acceptable level for manning and recruitment. The army is currently sized at 72,000 troops for the active personnel. That's the smallest it's been since the Napoleonic era. Certainly not the number of troops that the army is requiring should it be required to face a sufficient military challenge. So really concerning footage and testimony coming out of RAF Benson.
They're not getting paid very well either, Charlie, and if they then have to live in substandard accommodation, which you wouldn't inflict on your worst enemy, it's not exactly a great recruiting sergeant, is it?
It is a big problem for recruitment and retention as well.
Yeah.
Troops turning up, keen, motivated members of the population fighting to serve, keen to serve, but arriving and finding that they're not getting the standards they deserve once they're there. And I think this brings up some conversation as well about double standards, because with this conversation about accommodation, many commentators and analysts in the military space point towards what happens to asylum seekers, illegal migrants. We're spending £8 million a day at least on housing them in hotels. Meanwhile, soldiers are forced to live for many years in this sort of accommodation, partly because, as many troops will say, they know that they will soldier on. They understand that the government can get away with this sort of approach, many analysts tell me, because they know that troops will put up with it, because that's the sort they are. But, as I said, with the advent of social media and how easy it is for people to share this footage online and with journalists, we can reveal the shocking state that many people are left to deal with.
This is appalling, because we've had so many campaign groups saying you can't put asylum seekers and migrants in army bases, it's not fair, it's disgusting, da-da-da-da.
We'll put our troops in
there. But we'll put our troops in there.
Absolutely. Well, in reaction to all of this, I did get a statement from the MOD, and an MOD spokesperson told me that the new government is committed to improving the state of service housing as part of our drive to renew the nation's contract with those who serve. Our government's first King's Speech committed to the creation of a new Armed Forces Commissioner to be a strong, independent champion for service personnel and their families and help improve service life. That's a statement from the MOD. But while all that is said and while all this information comes out, the fact remains that today there are troops at an RAF base living in transit accommodation which is leaking, infested with rats and mould, putting their health and safety at risk.
Don't worry, they've created an Armed Forces Commissioner, another pointless layer of bureaucracy, which will achieve nothing.
Yes.
And at vast expense.
Yeah, exactly. That's the bit, isn't it? More taxpayers' money. Charlie
Good
Peters,
story,
thank
Charlie.
you very much. Absolutely shocking. And you will have your views on that one as well. And it will make you angry. gbnews.com/your say. Let us know what you think of Charlie's exclusive report.
Now up next, 330 arrests, 8 stabbings, 3 in critical condition, including a 32-year-old mother fighting for her life. But what are we talking about? You've guessed it, Notting Hill Carnival. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
It's a very difficult issue, this, right? As far as we know, the boxer with male chromosomes was born with female genitalia.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite simple. You know, sex in humans is binary and immutable because we are mammals. And there is a minority of people who have disorders of sexual development, and that can affect a person's reproductive organs. But these people are male or female. And yesterday, what we witnessed was basically just glorified male violence against women and girls. The difference is, I mean, that happens every day all over the world. And the difference is that in every other circumstance, we consider beating up women to be wrong, but it was deemed acceptable by those at the IOC because they're claiming that it's sport, but it's not. It's violence and it's wrong.
Peter, Lottie's right, isn't she, that we've been talking a lot recently about violence against women and girls, and regardless of whether this person is intersex or transgender, they have male chromosomes. That means they have a very, very distinct biological advantage that could actually be fatal to a female athlete competing against them.
Well, of course, sport does need to be fair, and we do need to examine this case very thoroughly. There are reports that the boxer, Iman Khalif, was born a biological woman. She is not transgender. She is not non-binary. She is not intersex. She may have elevated levels of testosterone, but that's entirely natural. It's beyond her control. It's the way she was born. And that is why the International Olympic Committee has said that she falls within the rules.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It is 11:21. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom with him, Andrew Pearce, and me, Dawn Neeson.
We're joined by the GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and Piers Pottinger, who is a political commentator and media extraordinary figure for many years. Look, gentlemen, we were going to talk about lots of stuff in the paper, but we want to talk to you about Keir Starmer's speech, his first one in the Rose Garden, where he said, Nigel, oh my God! Oh, come on! Where's
luck,
the
Nigel.
energy?
Well,
where's the charisma?
Yeah, Andrew,
where's the vision?
It's quite true that Keir Starmer is not a Tony Blair. So I do understand that. The important thing about this is that when you want a symbolic occasion, you use the Rose Garden. So Tony Blair used it when he met Bill Clinton because he wanted a bit of the then US President stardust to rub off on him. David Cameron launched the coalition with Nick Clegg in the Rose Garden. So this was actually an important speech, and the point there is, even if you didn't find it terribly exciting, he made some clear points about what we need to expect. So the budget, the word painful, I think probably that there's a very in front of that. If a Prime Minister is telling you a budget is painful, it's going to be very painful. He talks about his main priority of wealth creation, about growth. I think that what he was doing here is kind of setting things out for where we're going when Parliament returns next week.
I thought what he spent most of the time doing, Piers, was slagging off the Tories, and I felt like he still doesn't realise he's now Prime Minister. He's still in campaign mode. He's still behaving like the leader of the opposition. I didn't see this great vision as Prime Minister. What I'm going to do with this huge majority.
Yeah,
which
I mean, if that was an important speech, I'd like to see an unimportant one. The Labour Party say they've changed. They haven't changed. In 1976, Harold Wilson gave a peerage to a chap called Joseph Kagan, who supplied him with his Ganix raincoat.
He did, you're quite right.
Shortly after that, Kagan went to prison for tax fraud.
He did.
He also gave a peerage to Sir Eric Miller, who shortly after that tragically killed himself while awaiting fraud charges. So there's nothing new in people like Ali, and of course it was absolutely absurd he had a pass to Downing Street.
He gave £20,000 for Keir Starmer's wardrobe, including glasses.
Including glasses.
Absolutely, and you would have thought that Keir Starmer could afford his own suit and his own glasses.
Yes.
But it's endemic. The Labour Party hasn't learned lessons of the Wilson era and is up to the same tricks. With the trade unions, they've immediately caved into them, given them all this money, which means they're now going to have to tax
But that's
people.
not a cave-in.
They completely caved in,
Well,
Nigel. You know that. They paid them way over the odds. There was no...
One at a time, gentlemen.
There was no productivity deal in return. There is nothing that the government have done so far that shows any hope of growth in the country. Quite the reverse. We're going back
that's
to
a different issue. But taking the trade union bit, the 5.5% for teachers and nurses was the recommendation of the independent pay review bodies. What is the point of having them if you're going to ignore their advice?
ASLEF? What about the 15% for ASLEF, who then announced a strike the next day?
The strike the next day was on a different issue against a particular train company. The 14% is over 3 years, so not very different from the money that the nurses and the teachers
and they'll be
got.
on £70,000.
And they had backdated...
Before overtime.
Well, I'm not sure...
4-day week.
But they had backdated pay rises.
Just
also, of course, with immigration, which is an issue he didn't even refer to, one of the major election issues, he ignored completely.
He did.
Yvette Cooper is very cleverly now going to allow 46,000 asylum seekers a hearing, which will prevent them being returned to their country, and will then mean they'll move on to benefits, which will also mean they come off the statistics, because under the new legislation, benefits, they don't split by nationality. So the asylum seekers who are on benefits that are being shifted cleverly by Yvette Cooper, are actually going to cost this country in a lifetime £17 billion. Now, this is the kind of shenanigans, so much for Starmer's so-called honesty and service and all these platitudes that mean nothing. It is absolutely outrageous what this government is up to so far.
Well,
I think it's the worst government I've seen in my lifetime
stick with
now.
Immigration, because it was the Illegal Migration Act which broadly put 119,000 people who'd crossed the Channel, and they couldn't leave the country, but they couldn't stay either. They were made inadmissible by the Act. So what Yvette Cooper is trying to do is get them out of hotels.
Can't you just deport them?
Deport them to where?
Back to where they came from, if they're not genuine.
Well, but what if they are genuine?
Well, why don't we get on with that?
Well, that's exactly what she's... This is the point that I'm making.
But they're mostly not genuine, we know that.
Well, we don't know that. The 46,000 you're talking about is that you process these people... What had happened was the processing system had stopped completely because you couldn't send them anywhere, because we had Rwanda...
Because they'd thrown their papers away.
No, because we had Rwanda, which hadn't taken off, so they were stuck here. Now, the ones who are genuine asylum seekers and they get granted asylum should be allowed to stay.
But what's happening is a lot of them aren't, and they're still staying and costing this country huge sums of money.
You don't know that until we go through the process, and they weren't going through the process.
We do know that.
He didn't mention the word immigration.
This is the thing, isn't it?
20-minute speech. Key point. Parliament's back next week. All the projects that are coming ahead he's going to do. Didn't mention immigration, which is rapidly becoming the most important issue for voters.
Well, you could have been asked about it by one of the journalists.
Why didn't he mention it in his speech?
Because I don't think
because he doesn't think it's an important issue.
No, because the speech was about something different. So if you work through the various things there, that it was a 20-minute speech. It was about the economy. It was about wealth creation. It was about growth.
Don't you
it was
think
about
migration is a big factor in all of
just
that?
Happened.
That's a factor in all of it, and it's a factor in the riots, isn't it?
Well,
the fact you won't mention it is because he doesn't think migration is a problem.
It is a problem, and it's not being addressed. They talk about border command, this new wonderful thing. The first two people they approached to head it up have turned it down. They still haven't got someone to head it up because it's not going to work. It's clearly a ridiculous scheme. All that's happened is they've abandoned Rwanda, and it's going to cost this country billions more with this hopeless place awash with immigrants, which is what's now going to happen.
Rwanda would have cost $10 billion if they'd actually continued with it. It was never, even had it worked, it was never going to be value for money, which is why the permanent secretary at the Home Office wouldn't sign it off.
For the 46,000 people already at the moment waiting to be decided whether they're asylum seekers or not, but those 46,000, if you assume they're all going to stay, that's £17 billion alone. That excludes all the people coming in every day.
That's double Rwanda.
If they stay, they can work. And so, and even the ones who've been here in the system
Where are they
for a
going to
year.
live? Where are they going to live? Where are their kids going to go to school?
But they're building 1.5 million new homes.
They don't work because they're on benefit. I mean,
where are they going to live? Where are they going to live? Angela Rayner makes a great speech about all these extra homes, and she doesn't mention how much immigration is causing the pressure for the extra homes.
Yeah, OK, so if you move a lot of people into a certain area, there will certainly be pressure. But what you're talking about here is if these people end up settling here, they will pay taxes, they will work, they will contribute to the economy.
Really?
Well, yes, they will. I mean, they will work here. You can't say that every migrant who comes here is going to live off benefits, because they don't.
The majority do.
Well, but they don't. So I mean, this is
the trouble
nonsense.
is you can't.
If you come here as a legal migrant, you have no recourse to public funds. You have to pay a health surcharge to be able to use the NHS while you're here. You have to show a certain amount of money in your bank account to be here.
And if they don't have any money, you're saying the NHS won't treat them?
Well, they can't come here if they're legal.
If they're here and they use the NHS, they won't pay an NHS. They haven't got any money.
We're talking about the people who come here legally with working visas.
Right.
They won't get a visa if they won't pay the NHS surcharge, and that's something like it's over £1,000.
The illegal people who are coming in their thousands every day as we speak,
they don't pay anything.
There's nothing being done to stop them. And when the government keep talking about greater liaison with international police forces, the new head of Interpol, Vadelci Uriza, who's a Brazilian, and he has publicly stated he will not allow Interpol to be used for special government policies. He's made it absolutely clear that immigration, for example, illegal immigration, is a matter for individual governments.
Exactly.
So there is not going to be any cooperation.
Police officers from this new task force that's being set up, they'll be embedded in Europol, not Interpol, Europol, so we can actually get them back.
On that point, Jen, we have to end it. I just want to ask you, I want you to mark out of 10 for Keir Starmer's first keynote speech in the Rose Garden. Be honest.
I'll give him a 7.
As high as that?
Yeah, I would, yeah.
0.
Right. You knew that was coming, didn't you? That's Piers Pottinger and Nigel Nelson. But which
I'm
one,
being honest.
Which one do you... Are you Team Piers or Team Nigel? Let us know, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time for the news headlines with Sophia.
Dawn, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 11:30. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but that the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street earlier, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better, and next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. Speaking a short while ago, the Prime Minister also reiterated that economic growth is the top priority of the government.
I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
In other news, 5 more people were stabbed and 230 were arrested on the closing day of Notting Hill Carnival. That comes after 3 people were stabbed on Sunday, including a 32-year-old mother who's in a serious condition in hospital. Police have also said that 15 officers were assaulted and 90 arrests were made on the first day of the event. From today, the NHS 111 helpline will now offer mental health support to adults and children in crisis. Local health systems previously had their own separate phone lines, which took about 200,000 calls per month. It makes the NHS in England one of the first countries to offer such a support service for mental health issues as well as for physical problems. And after lots of speculation, Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour in 2025. The Britpop band, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced a series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3233 and 1.1850 euros. The price of gold is £1,897 and 25 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,330 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, I'm feeling supersonic. Give me gin and tonic. Oasis confirm their tour dates for next year. And I'm allegedly giddy with excitement. We'll have all the details. This is Britain's Newsroom. She's giddy with excitement. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hey, here's your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some warm, sunny weather in the southeast and some showers towards the northwest. In between, we have a slow-moving band of rain. Now, that's due to a front that's making very slow progress across the UK as we go through the next 24, 36 hours or so. And it is going to bring quite a bit of rain. It's already brought some rain across parts of Dumfries, Galloway area, and we could see some localised impacts as a result. But through into this afternoon, the heaviest rain's probably going to be across parts of Cumbria and into Wales as well. Like I said, though, to the southeast of this, it's going to be largely fine. Lots of sunshine, temperatures in the mid-20s, 25, 26 Celsius perhaps. Cooler towards the northwest, and here there will be some showers and a bit more cloud too. As we go through this evening then, more showers to come across some parts of Scotland. None of them look especially heavy, and they're going to be most frequent towards the west, perhaps in the east. A greater chance of some drier, brighter weather. Northern Ireland will also have a few showers, but a couple of sunny spells mixed in. A wetter end to the day for parts of northern England and into West Midlands and across Wales, with that front lingering here. But across more eastern parts of the Midlands, the southeast and the south of the UK, it is actually going to be a fine picture. Now, that front really doesn't make much progress as we go overnight, bringing further outbreaks of rain. Could even be the odd rumble of thunder near the front as we go through the night. And do watch out for some mist and fog in parts of the southwest as well. But in the southeast, even though we have some clear skies, we are going to still have some warm air, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a bit fresher towards the northwest. Like I said, though, that front really doesn't go anywhere particularly quickly, and so we're going to see some further rain in similar areas as we go through tomorrow, so still across parts of northern England, parts of Wales, filtering a little bit further eastwards into more parts of the Midlands as we go through the day, but that rain's also breaking up. It is going to be hotter than today across parts of the southeast, with temperatures in the high 20s.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
.38. This is Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce, and you're not Bev Turner.
No, I'm Dawn Neeson. Right, Paralympic legend and wheelchair user Lady Tanni Grey-Thompson was forced to crawl off an LENAR train as no one was available to help her. London North Eastern Railway say they are investigating the incident.
So she is not just an astonishing Paralympian, 11 gold medal, she's also a member of the House of Lords, and Lady Tanni Grey-Thompson joins us now. You've been, after all these years, if we can call you Tanni, can't we?
Absolutely.
How bad is it that it gets to the point where you have to literally crawl off a train?
So I booked assistance on a 7:15 train, missed it, got to Leeds at 7:30, so they agreed to put me on the next one. When we got to London, I waited 5 minutes, which you're meant to, before I started posting on social media or trying to contact the company. Tried to ring the assistance line, there was no one there. Sent text messages and started posting. Actually, at one point was screaming on the train for help. And I've got a very loud voice. And then I decided to get off. Now, a member of the cleaning staff did offer to help me, but they're not insured and they're not trained to use the ramp. So I'm not going to risk somebody's job if anything happens by them helping me. But they noticed that I was getting off the train, but I was pretty much off the train by the time someone saw me.
So you literally, Tanny, you had to crawl off the train to get off. No other way.
Yep, got onto the floor, which is not the greatest place to sit, threw all my stuff onto the platform, and then transferred off. So I can still do it. There's thousands of disabled people who can't. You know, I was considering pulling the emergency cord, but then that would have stopped the train going north. So, you know, it's absolutely awful in this day and age. And, you know, 2012 was brilliant as a Games. I mean, the best ever Paralympics. But it didn't change the will for disabled people. So, you know, to all the politicians, the Prime Minister who's going to be at the opening ceremony, you know, I'd say, if you're inspired by the Games, come home and do something to make it better for disabled people.
Well, that's the irony as well, isn't it? Because they're just about to open the Paralympics, Tanny, and yet here you are, Britain's most famous Paralympian. I hesitate to use this word, but almost humiliated.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty angry last night.
You must have been.
And, you know, it's humiliating to have to turn up at a station. We've got a legal right to turn up and go. It's humiliating to turn up and have to beg to get on a train or, you know, to have to scream to get off. I just want the same miserable experience of commuting as everyone else. I'm not asking for a gold-plated train. You know, I don't want special treatment. I just want to be able to get on and on. I'm still quite angry this morning, to be honest, because there are thousands of disabled people who don't have the platform I do.
Now, Tanny, you mentioned a member of the cleaning staff came to try and help you. What happened? Did you get any help from a member of staff who could help you?
They only saw me as I transferred off the train. I was in my chair on the platform, and it was the train manager from the train going north who then saw me and you know, absolutely apologetic, offered to help. You know, within minutes I had a senior member of LNER staff, you know, ringing me, offering me a taxi. It was actually quicker for me to jump on the tube. You know, it's just, it's exhausting, actually. You know, and I thought by now we'd do better, but we're just not there yet. I mean, I have to say, I'm literally at Eurostar at the moment, about to go to Paris. They've been fantastic. If Eurostar can do it, every other British company should be able to do it.
And has there been any improvement at all over the years, Tanny, with access for disabled users like you on the trains or not?
Well, I don't have to travel in the guards van anymore, so you know that's good. Yeah, there has been. You know, I travel a lot by train. I live in the northeast of England. You know, I can't. I drive, but it takes me 6 hours to drive to London. I can't do that every week and then work a week in Westminster. So it has been, but it's ad hoc. You know, they think the answer to everything is an app, and it's not. And the booking system, I booked last night, and okay, I changed my train. My view is, if they've helped me on a train, I have a contract with them. They should have got me. And the bit I get really annoyed about is that I have way more privilege than any other disabled person I know. You know, what about the people who don't have the platform I do, who can't do these things? It's happening to so many disabled people.
Well, Tanny, thanks for coming on with us. We know you've got a Eurostar to catch, so enjoy the Paralympics, and I hope LNER are hanging their head in shame, because they certainly should be. That's Tanny Gray-Thompson, Lady Tanny Gray-Thompson, our most illustrious Paralympian.
And you know,
you
absolutely, you just can't. I mean, I was reading Tanya's tweets overnight, and you just can't imagine the humiliation that involves.
I said I hesitate to use the word, but it must.
But it must be incredibly humiliating.
And she makes the point. She's a member of the House of Lords.
Yeah.
She's also a fabulously famous Paralympian because of her extraordinary achievements. But this is happening to disabled people all the time.
All the time, and they don't have Tanya's platform.
And I was at a tube the other day, and I said, it was near where I live in North London, and I said, how are you going to, can you manage? They said, well, where's the lift? I said, there's no lift, it's an escalator. can you manage?
No.
So, and I had to go and get a member of staff to help this woman. I know God only knows.
I don't know how people cope, I really don't, but good for Tanya for raising awareness,
Yeah.
but appalling that had to happen to her. Right, OK, we're moving on now. Up next are giving criminals an easy ride, shoplifting is soaring and our prisons are full. Find out more about this. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We'll see you soon.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales could be back to full duties by the autumn. This would be wonderful news.
Well, I actually don't think she is going to be back to full-time duties by the autumn. I think that's how I read it. But in fact, I think what they were saying, this is a report by the Daily Mail's royal editor, Rebecca English, is that Catherine is still recovering and she's still having treatment, but she doubts whether she'll be back to full-time duties, but we will be seeing her. So we will be, seeing her at big royal events, and she'll, if she's up to it, she will, appear now and then, but most of her work will be done from home because she's still having the cancer treatment. And as she said way back in the summer, she has good days and she has bad days.
Yeah, and we can all understand that, can't we? But it does make such a difference, doesn't it, to catch glimpses of her and seeing her and William this week congratulating the GB athletes after the success at the Olympics. It really does make all the difference just to see her, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I think, she wants to get out there, but I don't think she's going to be back at the daily chore of royal duties, visiting hospitals, things like that. I don't think she'd be strong enough to do that. But, I mean, she looks terrific. We know she's had a brutal year, in fact, probably much, much worse than any of us can imagine. And so she's, doing what her doctors are telling her. She's taking it very gently. I'm sure she wants to go full steam ahead, but she is being restrained, as it were.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Now, according to an analysis of Ministry of Justice data, police officers have now almost entirely stopped punishing shoplifters, despite the number of offences soaring to record levels.
Meanwhile, there are concerns that community resolutions are on the rise, with even those accused of knife and sex offences avoiding criminal records.
So what's going on with policing? Are we policing criminals, or are we patting them on the back and saying, if you say sorry...
Say sorry in a nice way.
In a nice way. Oh, you're all right. Let's talk to former Detective Superintendent of Scotland Yard, Shabnam Chowdhury, who's a good friend of this programme. Shabnam, morning to you. This is... I mean, the Prime's... let's not get drawn into the Prime Minister's speech today, but he was talking about how things stopped working, 14 years of Tory rule. This is an issue, isn't it, for Joe Soap? It appears the police, because of this pressure on their work time and prison places, they can't really do their job properly.
Yeah, good morning to you both. It's an epidemic, really, isn't it? It's got worse. I remember having this conversation in October on 9, and then again in February more recently, and nothing seems to have changed. In fact, it's got worse and worse. And I think the issue around community resolutions, where I think there has been some increase in that, is going to be really difficult to manage because, number one, even when you're dealing with sexual offences, and they talk about issues that happen within schools or within, young children, for example, that still might be at the criminal age, they basically are not recorded anywhere. So if any of those children go on to offend further, there's no record of it. So they can't really monitor those individuals. And then you talk about robbery. So when community resolutions is exactly what it says on the tin. It's about community. So if there's an issue around criminal damage, you can deal with that with either they pay for it or they make an apology or they have some form of, opportunity with those neighbours and the victims to work together so that it resolves any future antisocial behavioural problems. But this shoplifting is a serious, serious problem, and shoplifters know that they can get away with it. They walk into shops, stores, everywhere else, and they take significant amount of goods, property, clothing, retail, food, whatever it is. They think it's on show for them to be able to take as and when they want.
Shabnam, Yvette Cooper says she will use her crime and policing bill to give the police stronger powers to ban repeat shoplifters from town centres. Do you think, A, we have enough police to actually do that, and B, it will work?
No, I don't think it will work. And I think the problem is that banning people from town centres or even banning people from shops, which does actually happen, when they go back into them, then they try and charge them with burglary because it's they become trespassers. They don't get convictions out of them. You don't have the policing resources. You no longer have town centre teams, which is what Yvette Cooper's talking about. You don't have enough neighbourhood officers to be able to deal with it. The resourcing for policing is an issue. On top of that, shoplifting is not a priority crime, and it never will be, because other crimes supersede that, such as violence against women and girls, serious robberies and knife crime. So I'm not really sure how they're going to resolve this. It's become a mess for a very, very, very long time. And convictions, prosecutions and bringing offenders to justice is got worse now than it has ever been.
Shabnam, just one thing that gets our viewers very, very angry is just recently we've seen a middle-aged woman being given a 15-month sentence, straight to jail, do not pass go, etc., for a Facebook post. Meanwhile, we've had 2 sex offenders recently given suspended sentence and literally walking free from court. As a former detective, that must make you very angry.
Look, I think for any detective that's investigating crimes, and particularly serious crimes, the decisions by the judicial process can be very, very frustrating. But when you're talking about the Facebook crimes that have been committed, you're talking about that's linked to the riots, and that was something that needed to be addressed immediately because the escalation and the seriousness of it and the fact that particular sections of the communities were being targeted. But of course, even as a former detective, I can give you examples where we had sexual offences where there was either a not guilty, or the fact was that there was absolutely no sentence that actually to prevent that person from committing those crimes further. Very, very difficult. And also, let's not pretend that this shoplifting issue is just the tip of the iceberg. There will be thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses that don't have the confidence or the trust to ring police because they know they're not going to get the appropriate response. Something needs to be done because that element of crime is completely broken.
All right, that's former Detective Superintendent of Scotland Yard, Shabnam Chowdhury.
Thank you.
That's the point. Shops don't even bother telling the police because they know nothing's going to happen.
No, exactly.
That's it from Britain's Newsroom.
That flew past. Thank you for joining us.
Up next in Afternoon Britain
is with Tom and Emily.
There'll be pain to come. That was the message from Sir Keir Starmer from Downing Street this morning. But where will the pain fall? Where will we be hit? We'll be asking those questions.
Yes, and he was rather dismissive about any allegations regarding cronyism, wasn't he? What exactly is he going to do about all of that? And also, commit a knife attack? Oh, just say sorry. Commit a sexual offence? Just say sorry. Apparently, that's the state of our criminal justice system. Stick with us, 12 till 3. Good afternoon, Britain. After the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split across the UK today. Many northern areas seeing some rain, but largely dry and fine further south. So we can see this rainfall first thing this morning across many parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But for Northern Ireland, it will quickly clear here, so conditions improve as the day goes on. That rain just moving into Cumbria and Wales later on too. And that rain just quite heavy and persistent at times, so some fairly poor travelling conditions, especially across parts of southwestern Scotland. Ahead of it, dry and bright and increasingly warm, could see highs reaching around 25 or 26 degrees in the southeast. So moving into the evening, conditions improve for many parts of Scotland. Some late spells of sunshine around, maybe the odd shower. But for southwestern Scotland and Cumbria, that rain just persisting right throughout the evening. So again, a bit of a difficult commute home here. A few showers also for Northern Ireland, and that rain just beginning to fringe into southwestern England too as we end the day. But for the rest of England, it's a fine end with some late spells of sunshine. Into the evening, that weather front will just move a little bit further eastwards. It starts to weaken as it does so, but still some patchy rain on it as we move through the nighttime period. Either side of it, some clear skies, and for all of us, it's a fairly mild night. Towns and cities staying firmly above double figures. Into Wednesday morning, that area of cloud and patchy rain just really lingers across many central parts of the country. Behind it, another spell of rain moving in for Northern Ireland and Scotland. So after a little bit of a drier spell, turns wet, unfortunately,